Welcome to seventh grade math. We did a spreadsheet in class yesterday, and I had you upload that to Dropbox. All right, to get started today, we're going to review some concepts of converting common fractions to percents to decimals. And we've done this previously this year and last year. So we're going to take 1/4 and convert it to a decimal. So 1/4 of 1 is 0.25. And then if we want to find a percent, we multiply it times 100 and get 25%. 1/2 is 0.5 or 50%. 3/4 is 0.75 or 75%. 1/5. So the way I do think of this in my head is how many times will 5 go into 100? 0.2 or 20%. And then 2/5 is 0.4 or 40%. 3/5 is 0.6 or 60%. 4/5 is 0.8 or 80%. So hopefully you see the pattern there with the fifths. 1/5 is 0.2, or 1/5 of 100 is 20, and you just 2 times 20 is 40, so on.
Get ready for the lesson. Surveys. The graph to the right shows the results of a survey about favorite types of TV shows. So notice some things about this graph. There's a title, types of shows teens spend the most time watching. Notice that the y-axis, percent of teens, the x-axis shows the type of shows, and all of the all the bars on the graph, it says 24 for action, that's 24%, and then 20% for cartoons, 26% for comedies, and so on. What percent of the teens chose comedy? So if we look over at the graph, look at comedy, it says 26, so we know it's 26%. Number 2, write this percent as a ratio in simplest form. And a reminder, way back in lesson 4-6, we wrote percents like 26% by writing fractions with denominators of 100, and then we simplified them. So we have 26%, and we're going to write that as a fraction of 26 over 100. So there's 26 out of 100 enjoy comedy shows. Now we need to simplify that. So if we divide by the common factor of 2, we get 13/50ths, and we can't simplify that anymore. And another way to write that is 13 to 50. We can use the same method to write percents like 8 1/3% and 190% as fractions. Scaffolding questions. Number 1, what fraction is equivalent to 10%? So the first thing we're going to do is write 10 over 100, and then we're going to simplify by dividing the numerator and denominator by 10. Number 2, what fraction is equivalent to 25%? So again, we're going to write 25 over 100, and we'll simplify that by dividing the numerator and denominator by 25. Number 3, what decimal is equivalent to 96%? So if you remember from earlier this year, to convert a percent to a decimal, we're going to divide by 100, which means we're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left, and we'll get 0.96. What decimal is equivalent to 96.5? So the same thing, we want to divide 96.5 by 100, and we'll end up with 0.965. Examples: percents as fractions. Number 1, write 8 1/3% as a fraction in simplest form. 8 1/3%, we're going to write a fraction of 8 1/3 over 100. Now divide. So remember that a fraction is a division problem, so we can rewrite 8 1/3 over 100 as 8 1/3 divided by 100. Convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. Remember that we cannot divide mixed numbers. And then we're going to multiply by the reciprocal because we don't actually divide fractions. If you remember, we have to multiply by the reciprocal of the second number. So we get 25 thirds times 1 over 100. Now we need to simplify. So 25 will go into 100 4 times. And then we're going to multiply 1 over 12. Number 2, toys. A collectible action figure sold for 190% of its original price. Write this percent as a fraction in simplest form. So we have 190%, and we need to write that as a fraction. So 190 over 100. Now we simplify. Get 19 over 10 because we divided the numerator and denominator by 10. And then we're going to rename as a mixed number because we're not going to leave anything as an improper fraction. So the toy sold for 1 9/10 of its original price. And just a little reminder here that a percent greater than 100 is equal to a number greater than 100. So it was 190%, and our answer is 1 9/10, which is greater than 1. Check your progress. Write each percent as a fraction in simplest form. 150%. So we need to define that. 150 over 100. Now we're going to simplify. So if we find the greatest common factor, which is 50, we can reduce that to 3 to 2. And now we're going to rename it as a mixed number, 1.5. B, 17.5%. Write a fraction. So we have 17.5 over 100. And we're going to write that as a division problem now, or we're going to restate the division problem. So 17.5 divided by 100. Convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. So we're going to multiply 17 times the denominator of 2. Get 34 plus 1 is 35 over 2 divided by 100. And now, since we can't divide fractions, we're going to multiply 35 halves by 1 over 100. Simplify. Now we're going to multiply out what's left, and we get 7/40. C, 33 1/3%. We're going to write that as a fraction, so 33 1/3 over 100. We're going to rewrite the division problem, 33 1/3 divided by 100. Convert the mixed number to an improper fraction, so 33 times 3 is 99, plus 1 is 100, divided by 100. And we're going to multiply that by the reciprocal. So we get 100 over 3 times 1 over 100. And now we're going to simplify and multiply. Okay, I have my webcam on so you don't forget what I look like. To write a fraction like 8 over 25 as a percent, multiply the numerator and the denominator by a number so that the denominator is 100. So 8 over 25, what can we multiply 25 by to make it 100? That's right, 4. So if we multiply 8 times 4, 25 times 4, we get 32 over 100. And we can turn that into a percent, 32%. If the denominator is not a factor of 100, you can write fractions as percents by using proportions. Examples, fractions as percents. Number 3, write 4 over 15 as a percent. round to the nearest hundredth. So we'll start with an estimate. 4/15 is about 4/16, which equals 1/4 or 25%. So they've just rounded the 15 to 16 so they can do some quick mental math. And then we can check back later when we get our answer to see if we're close. So we're going to write as a proportion. So 4/15 equals n over 100. And we need to find the cross products to solve for a proportion. So 400 equals 15n. And we're going to divide each side by 15 so we can get the variable n isolated by itself. And because 15 times n is bounded by multiplication, we need to undo it with division. So 400 divided by 15 equals 15n over 15. And we're going to simplify, and I'm just going to show you the 15 and 15 just to help you visualize that that becomes 1n or n. And then you can use a calculator to divide 400 by 15. And we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So that's why we're going to say 26.67 is about or approximately n. And if we check for reasonableness, our answer 26.67 is approximately 25%, which was our estimate. So that is good. Number 4, blogging in Boston. 89 out of 100,000 residents blog. Write this fraction as a percent. So write a proportion. We're going to have 89 out of 100,000 equals n out of 100. Find the cross product. So we multiply 100 times 89 to get 8,900, and 100,000 times n to get 100,000 n. Now we're going to divide each side by 100,000 so we can get that variable n all by itself. And we'll simplify, and I'm just doing that to show you. And then if you divide 8,900 by 100,000, we get 0.089 equals n. So 0.089% of Boston residents blog. Check your progress. Write each fraction as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth if necessary. D, 2 over 15. Write as a proportion. So 2 over 15 equals n over 100. Find the cross product. 200 equals 15n. Divide each side by 15 so that we can get n by itself. And we'll simplify. We'll get rid of the 15s just as a visual. And then you can use a calculator. So 13.33% is about n. E, 7 over 1600. Write as a proportion. 7 over 1600 equals n over 100. Find the cross products. 700 equals 16n. We're going to divide each side by 1600 to get n by itself. So 700 over 1600 equals 1600n over 1600. We'll simplify out the 1600s, and then we'll divide. You can use a calculator, and you get 0.44%. F is 17 over 25. Now this one you could almost do in your head because we want to get the denominator to 100, so we can multiply 25 times 4 to get 100 and 17 times 4 to get 68. But we will write a proportion. 17 over 25 equals n over 100. Find the cross products. 1700 equals 25n. Divide each side by 25 so that we can get n by itself. And then we will simplify. And that will get us n equals 1700 over 25. And if we do it on a calculator, it's 68%. In this lesson, you have written percents as fractions and fractions as percents. In Chapter 4, you wrote percents and fractions as decimals. You can also write a fraction as a percent by first writing the fraction as a decimal and then writing the decimal as a percent. As you can see, they all have the same value. Percents, fractions, and decimals are different names that represent the same number. Another way to find a percent equivalent to a given fraction is to divide the fraction's numerator by its denominator. Multiply the resulting decimal by 100 and write the percent symbol. Examples, fractions as percents. Number 5, write 5/6 as a percent, round to the nearest hundredths. So remember, a fraction is a division problem. 5/6, we're going to write as a decimal by dividing 5 by 6. And you can use your calculator for this. So you get 0.8333 repeating. Multiply by 100 and add the percent. So it's 83.33% because it said round to the nearest hundredth. Number 6, books. Bryce has read 3/5 of a book. What percent of the book has he read? So if you remember at the beginning of the lesson, 3/5 was one of the common fractions that we converted to a percent and a decimal. 3/5, right as a decimal, equals 0.6. Multiply by 100 and add the percent. So it equals 60%. So Bryce has read 60% of the book. Check your progress. Write each fraction as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth if necessary. G, write 5/16 as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth. So 5/16, all we're doing is dividing 5 by 16 to write a decimal, and it's 0.3125. And to make it a percent, we multiply by 100, or you just move the decimal to the right 2 places. And remember, we are rounding to the nearest hundredth. It doesn't play into this one, but it will next, I believe. H, write 7/12 as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth. 7/12, write it as a decimal, you just divide 7 by 12, and that's the decimal you get. So we're going to multiply it by 100 and add the percent, but we're also going to round to the hundredth place. I, write 2/9 as a percent and round to the nearest hundredth. So 2/9, divide 2 by 9. That's the decimal we get. We're going to change it to a percent by multiplying it by 100, and we'll round to the hundredths. And then J, Mika is mowing lawns to earn extra money. She has mowed 6 out of 13 lawns. What percent of the lawns has she mowed? 6/13. That's a decimal. 0.4615384615. And then we'll multiply by 100 and round to the nearest hundredths, and we get 46.15%. Some fractions with denominators that are not factors of 100 are used often in everyday situations. It is helpful to memorize these fractions and their equivalent decimals and percents. These common equivalents are shown below. So 1/3 as a decimal, 0.3 repeating. We have the repeating bar, and as a percent, it's 33 1/3%. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I do think that it is important that you try to memorize these. It'll help with your everyday math. Additional examples. Number 1, write 12.5% as a fraction in simplest form. 12.5%, I'm going to write it as a fraction. 12.5 over 100. We can divide. 12.5 divided by 100. Convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. So 12 times 2 is 24 plus 1 is 25/2 divided by 100. Multiply by the reciprocal. 25 over 2 times 1 over 100. Simplify the 25 once, and 25 goes into 100 4 times. Multiply what's left, and we get 1/8. Number 2, nutrition. In a recent consumer poll, 41.8% of the people surveyed said they gained nutrition knowledge from family and friends. What fraction is this? Write in simplest form. So the first thing we have to do is we need to make that a fraction. 41.8. So if you remember earlier this year and last year, we talked about how can we say that in words. So it's 41 and 8/10. So we're going to write that as 41 and 8/10%. And we're going to write it as a fraction, 41 and 8/10 over 100. And then we'll rewrite as 41 and 8/10 divided by 100, which is really the same thing as that, as the fraction, right? And now we're going to convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. So if we multiply 41 times 10, that's 410, plus 8 from the numerator is 418 over 10 divided by 100. And in order to divide fractions, we actually multiply by the reciprocal. So we get 418 over 10 times 1 over 100. And then we'll simplify. So we get, if we divide by 2, which is the easiest thing right off, we get 209, and then we get 50. And that is as simplified as it will get. So we multiply what's left. 209 times 1 is 209, and 10 times 50 is 500. Number 3, write 3/7 as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth. So 3 over 7, we're going to write it as a decimal, and we're going to just simply divide 3 by 7 to get that long decimal. And then we're going to multiply it by 100 and add the percent. We're also going to round to the nearest hundredth. So we get 42.85%. And remember, when you multiply a decimal times 100, you can simply move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Number 4, farms. A farmer calculated that 9/20 of her goats were brown. Write the fraction as a percent. So we're going to take 9/20. We're going to divide 9 by 20 to write it as a decimal. So 0.45. Multiply by 100 and add the percent. So 45%. Number 5, write 5/12 as a percent, round to the nearest hundredth. 5/12. So we're just going to divide 5 by 12 to get the decimal. And there is the decimal. Now we're going to multiply by 100, round to the hundredths, and add the percent. Number 6, produce. In one shipment of fruit to a grocery store, 5 out of 8 bananas were still green. Find the amount as a percent. So we're going to take 5/8. So it's 5 out of 8 bananas. And we're going to divide 5 by 8 to write it as a decimal of 0.625. Now we're going to multiply by 100 and add the percent. We don't have to round this one because it only goes out one place. It goes to the tenths, so we don't have to worry about rounding to the hundredths. Okay, here's your homework for tonight. Page 331 to 332, 2 through 32 even, and 46 through 53 all.